Every empire in history has made the same promise. Your money is safe with us. Every government has sworn their system would last forever, and every single time, without exception, they were lying. Not intentionally, perhaps, but lying nonetheless. From ancient Rome to revolutionary France, from the American Confederacy to modern-day Lebanon, millions of people have woken up to discover that their entire lives were built on sand. Their savings, worthless, their paychecks, meaningless, their future, stolen by systems they believed were unbreakable. Here's the truth no one wants to face. Collapse isn't some rare tragedy. Collapse is the default setting of human civilization. The real question, the only question that matters, isn't whether financial systems will fail. It's whether you'll be ready when they do. The most dangerous lie you believe. We look at our bank balances and see security. We look at our national currencies and see permanence. We've been trained to believe that money is solid ground beneath our feet. But money isn't ground. It's air. It's trust. It's belief. And belief can evaporate in a heartbeat. This is why history is so terrifying and so invaluable. Every collapse leaves behind breadcrumbs, patterns, warnings, lessons written in the blood and tears of those who trusted too much. And if you're brave enough to look, you'll see something disturbing. The survivors of these disasters weren't the optimists. They were the ones who doubted first. Let me take you on a journey through the graveyard of dead currencies, when gold itself betrayed its people. Take the Byzantine Empire, the eastern half of Rome that somehow survived 1,000 years after the West fell into darkness. At the heart of their economy was the gold solidus, a coin so trusted that merchants from London to Baghdad accepted it without question. For centuries, it was the closest thing the medieval world had to a global reserve currency. You'd think they would have learned from Rome's disaster with the silver denarius, when emperors kept debasing it until it was basically tin with a silver coating. But no. Centuries later, the Byzantines repeated the exact same mistake, this time with gold. They started slowly. A little less purity here, a few cheaper alloys there. At first, nobody noticed. Then, like a crack spreading across ice, trust shattered. The coin that had anchored Mediterranean civilization became just another government lie. The Byzantine economy, once the envy of the world, lost the very foundation it stood on. And who survived? Not the ones with piles of government coins. Not the ones who trusted imperial decrees. It was the merchants who had quietly hoarded real gold and land beyond the emperor's reach. While everyone else watched their wealth vanish like smoke, these few preserved what mattered. The first timeless lesson. Governments will always dilute their money. Always. And when they do, real value runs to assets they cannot counterfeit. When death became an economic opportunity. But not every collapse comes from greedy rulers tampering with coins. Sometimes, it comes from shocks that strike like lightning from a clear sky. In 1347, Europe was hit by the Black Death, the most devastating pandemic in human history between 1342 and 1351. Half of Europe died screaming. Cities emptied overnight. Villages vanished from maps. Trade routes crumbled. But here's where the story gets uncomfortable. When half the labor force disappears, labor becomes precious. The survivors could suddenly demand wages their grandparents never dreamed of. Land that once cost a fortune could be bought for pocket change. Houses stood abandoned. Fields lay empty. And the survivors? They were in a buyer's market. Does this sound familiar yet? During COVID-19, we watched a modern replay of this ancient horror. Supply chains collapsed. Governments printed trillions in panic. And while millions of ordinary people struggled to pay rent, those with cash and liquidity scooped up property, stocks, and businesses at fire sale prices. Housing prices soared. Stock markets recovered almost instantly. And the wealth gap exploded. The lesson is brutal but true. Pandemics don't just kill people. They redistribute wealth. They always have. Survivors of the Black Death climbed the social ladder on the backs of tragedy. Survivors of COVID with reserves did the same. Crises reward those with cash. They punish those without it. That's not opinion. That's history. The lie of too big to fail. While pandemics show us how fast shocks can flip an economy, the collapse of Renaissance Florence teaches us something equally vital. The biggest institutions can fall like dominoes. In the 1340s, Florence was Europe's financial capital, home to banking dynasties like the Bardi and Peruzzi, names that commanded respect across continents. These houses had lent enormous sums to kings, most disastrously to Edward III of England, who needed money for his wars with France. Then Edward stopped paying. Just ... stopped. The banks collapsed. Depositors were ruined. Trade froze. Florence, once rich and mighty, was thrown into chaos. The ordinary citizen who had trusted these seemingly invincible institutions discovered a horrifying truth. Size is not safety. Reputation is not protection. What did people learn? That too big to fail is a lie, as old as finance itself. Institutions exist to profit, not to save you. When they fall, they will drag your savings down with them. This lesson repeats like a drumbeat through history. From Florentine banks to Lehman Brothers in 2008. From the Great Depression to Lebanon's frozen accounts in 2019. Survival belongs to those who understand that an institution's promises are only good until the day they're not. When your own country destroys its money, the American Civil War is remembered for battles and speeches. But behind the gunpowder was a brutal financial war that most Americans have forgotten or never knew. Both the Union and the Confederacy discovered that war requires money, lots of it. So they printed it. In the North, they issued greenbacks, paper currency backed not by gold but by the promise of the United States itself. Bold, patriotic, and inflationary. The more they printed, the less each dollar bought. But the South experienced something darker. The Confederacy printed graybacks in staggering quantities. By war's end, Confederate inflation had reached levels we can barely comprehend, thousands of %. Soldiers' paychecks were worthless before they could spend them. Families carried bags of bills that couldn't buy a loaf of bread. By 1865, Confederate currency wasn't just weak, it was dead. What mattered in that collapse? Not paper promises. Hard assets. Land, food, gold. Anything real held value, while money became a sick joke. For ordinary Southerners, this was apocalyptic. Lifelong savings disappeared overnight. For opportunists with tangible goods, the war was a chance to seize wealth at pennies on the dollar. This is the lesson Americans rarely hear but desperately need. Your own country has already lived through currency collapse. And when it happened, protection came not from trusting the paper in your wallet, but from holding value the system couldn't inflate away. When revolution devours its children, France offers an even more brutal case study. In the 1790s, as revolutionaries toppled the monarchy and seized church lands, they issued a new paper currency. They are backed, supposedly, by confiscated property. These notes were meant to stabilize the economy. Instead, the government printed them with abandon. Each new batch diluted the last. Prices spiraled. Wages collapsed. The assignat became worthless. Farmers refused to sell food for paper, demanding goods or silver instead. In Paris, the bread riots returned. The revolution began eating itself. Who survived? Not the patriots clutching revolutionary currency. The ones who held food, gold, or property, things the government couldn't print out of thin air. The lesson came too late for ordinary Parisians. Promises, no matter how noble, are only worth what others will accept. When trust breaks, your savings don't just shrink. They vanish. The death trap of foreign debt. Fast forward 2 centuries to Asia. In 1997, what began as a speculative attack on the Thai baht spiraled into regional catastrophe. Thailand had borrowed heavily in dollars, confident their currency peg would hold. It didn't. When the baht collapsed, debts in foreign currency became unpayable overnight. Investors fled. Currencies across Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea collapsed in a chain reaction. Economies shrank. Unemployment soared. Governments begged the IMF for mercy. Who suffered most? Not the global hedge funds, who sparked the panic. It was ordinary citizens whose savings evaporated, whose mortgages doubled, whose jobs disappeared. And yet, the pattern was painfully familiar. Those who held dollars or assets abroad survived. Those who trusted local currency drowned. Nations dependent on foreign debt were forced into brutal austerity, while Wall Street bought Asian assets at fire sale prices. The lesson echoes from Byzantium to Argentina. Debt in someone else's money is a death trap. When the storm hits, it's never the creditor who drowns. It's the debtor. It's happening right now. By now, the pattern should be clear. Whether revolutionary France, Civil War America, or modern Asia, the themes repeat: paper money collapses, debt, chains, nations, and families. And survivors are never the ones who trust the system most, but those who see its fragility before it cracks. The most chilling part, collapse isn't ancient history, it's happening right now. In Lebanon, between 2019 and 2021, banks did something that still feels unthinkable to most people in the developed world. They locked the doors. Citizens woke to find their deposits frozen, withdrawals limited, and their currency in freefall. The Lebanese pound lost over 90% of its value. A lifetime of savings became pocket change. People lined up outside banks, begging for their own money. They were told it was gone. And it wasn't just the poor. Middle-class families, retirees, doctors, engineers, anyone who trusted the system was wiped out. The lesson was brutal. Your money in the bank isn't yours. It's a loan you've made to an institution that can decide, in a crisis, not to pay you back. The people who survived had diversified abroad, held real assets like gold or property, or kept cash outside the banking system. Everyone else was trapped. If this sounds far away, it shouldn't. In 2008, Americans watched their homes repossessed and pensions decimated while the banks that caused the crisis got bailouts. In 2020, trillions were printed during the pandemic, inflating asset prices for the wealthy while leaving ordinary wages frozen. In 2023, regional banks collapsed almost overnight when depositors panicked, reminding everyone that too big to fail is a fairy tale we tell ourselves until the doors slam shut. The survival playbook from history. So, how do you protect yourself when everything falls apart? History shows there's no single answer. In Byzantium, it was gold. After the Black Death, it was liquidity to buy abandoned land. In Florence, it was not trusting too big to fail bankers. In the Confederacy, it was hard goods. In France, it was food and property. In Asia, it was avoiding debt in foreign currency. In Lebanon, it was getting out before the doors closed. The patterns shift, but the theme is constant. Survival comes not from blind trust in paper or institutions, but from recognizing what holds real value when illusions shatter. And here's the paradox that should wake you up. Collapse is both tragedy and opportunity. For the unprepared, it's ruin. But for those with resilience, liquidity, or assets that can't be printed away, it's the moment to acquire wealth at a fraction of its cost. After the Black Death, peasants became landowners. After 2008, those with cash bought homes while millions were foreclosed. History shows us that protection isn't just defense. It's positioning yourself to seize what others, under pressure, are forced to give up. The deeper truth, but wealth isn't only about what you own. It's about what you can do. The survivors of history weren't just those with gold or property. They were those who could create value when others couldn't. The baker who could still provide bread. The craftsman who could repair tools. The farmer who could feed a community. The merchant who could move goods across borders. These were the people who didn't just survive collapses. They rose in them. In every crisis, money loses meaning, but production never does. People still need to eat, build, trade, live. And those who can meet those needs are never poor for long. That's the deeper protection. Not blind faith in institutions or governments, but the combination of real assets, real skills, and the awareness that illusions always collapse. Every crisis is a transfer, from the many who trusted, to the few who prepared. From paper promises to tangible value. From passive savers to active builders. History has shown this pattern again and again. The question that matters. So the question isn't whether everything falls apart, it always does. The question is whether you, LLB, one of the many left holding worthless promises, or one of the few holding something real. History doesn't repeat exactly, but if you ignore it, it will crush you all the same. If this changed how you see the world, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look. But more importantly, act now. Before the doors close.